Hi everyone, in this video we're going to translate chapter 18 of the Ecce textbook. But before we dive in, we want to do a couple things. So as always, one, you want to make sure that you have the vocab under control, that you've memorized all the words and you feel comfortable with them, not only seeing and translating them, but using them if you write something in Latin. The other thing you want to do is make sure you've read the grammar notes. You could either watch my grammar video or read the textbook, whatever you need to do, but we're coming back to adjectives in this chapter, and noun-adjective agreement tends to be one of the trickier things for my students. So I think it's important that you really feel comfortable with this before you move forward, and that you're used to seeing these adjectives matching nouns and what they look like and sound like. It'll just help you as you translate. So make sure you've read it. We'll do a little review in a second before we dive in, because it is important to make sure you have that before you translate the story. But just make sure you've read on your own and taken some notes and that you feel comfortable with it. Once you have all that down, you want to practice your pronunciation and your speaking and listening, right? So you want to find a partner, someone in class, someone at home, whoever you can find. Read this story aloud to them, right? Read it aloud so you practice your pronunciation, and then have them read it back to you. That way you're practicing your listening skills. It's really important that you do that because, like I always say, when you're speaking this out loud or listening to it, you'll hear the noun-adjective pairs and you'll start to really recognize them and understand what case they are just by hearing and listening and speaking them. It all helps you to understand this. So you want to make sure that you're not just reading it in your head and writing it, that you are actually speaking and listening. So before we go too much further and do translation, let's just do a quick review of the grammar, and it's noun-adjective agreement, like I said. So this slide is the same one I showed you in chapter 16. We talked about how adjectives are describer words, right? They describe or modify nouns. So if you said the happy boy or the energetic girl, happy and energetic are adjectives that are describing boy and girl. So you're saying basically what kind of boy? Oh, the happy boy. Got it. You're describing it. That's what we use adjectives for. In English, it's pretty straightforward. In Latin, you need to make sure that they're matching in three ways. So the adjective needs to match the noun in case, number, and gender. And we call this agreement. So just make sure you feel comfortable with that moving forward. Then we said, and you want to keep this in mind, that nouns do have a fixed gender, right? So every noun only has one gender, adjectives don't. So you can think of them like chameleons, right? They're going to match whatever they're next to, whatever they're describing, which is why you would say puella romana, puer romanus, and vehiculum romanum. Romana, romanus, and romanum all mean Roman, right? It's the exact same adjective. The reason it's spelled differently is because of the gender. Puella is feminine, puer is masculine, vehiculum is neuter. So this idea, you want to kind of lock in, the idea that an adjective is describing a noun. So last chapter, you learned about adjectives that end in us, a, We call them first and second declension adjectives. In this chapter, you're going to learn adjectives that use is, right? So is, ise. And it represents the masculine, feminine, and neuter forms. It's the same idea as us, a, It's just slightly different endings. We call these third declension adjectives because they're using endings that are similar, not exactly the same, but similar to third declension nouns. So you're going to see this is why in chapter 16 we said if you take a first and second declension adjective and match it to a third declension noun, it's not going to be spelled the same way. When you use a third declension adjective and match it with a third declension noun, it will be spelled almost always, or let me rephrase and say often, not always. It will be spelled the exact same way. So the good news is this is the last group of adjectives. There's first and second declension and third. So once you get through this, you've seen all the adjectives, you'll be ready to go. All right, but we do want to process this a little bit and make sure we understand it. So again, to match an adjective to a noun, the first thing you want to do is figure out the noun's case, number, gender. You look at the genitive singular, the second piece of the noun, to figure out the declension, and then you just work backwards, right? Once you have the case, number, and gender of your noun, you use the same case, number, and gender for your adjective. Okay, and we said that when your noun is third declension, it's not going to be spelled the exact same way as a first and second declension adjective, which is totally fine. But now that we're introducing third declension adjectives, there's a much more likely chance that it will be spelled the same way. Okay, so you want to kind of process that and make sure you understand how these adjectives are matching nouns. It's basically a continuation of chapter 16. But don't go too crazy. You'll be able to spot the pairs. Even if you're not feeling 100% confident in this, the more you read and practice, you're going to be able to figure this out. So don't stress too much. So when you put all these pieces together, this is what your chart looks like. So up top, we have the noun ending chart, right? And you want to focus in on third declension because that's really what we're looking at here. Down below, you have third declension adjectives. And you want to notice the is, is basically matching third declension nouns, right? Some of it's a little different. But for instance, if you go down the column in third declension for masculine and feminine, feminine. You'll have blank is ema, s ibis, s ibis, right? If you look at your adjectives, you have is eme, right? So there's your first difference. The ablative singular for a third declension noun is the letter E. For adjectives, it's the long I. Okay, so there's a difference there. But then the plural, you have ace, eum, ibis, ace, ibis. So it's pretty close. It's not exactly the same. You'll notice in genitive plural for adjectives, it's ium instead of just um, but it's pretty close. And this is why we call this new group of adjectives third declension adjectives. Okay? So when you translate, if you really need it, make sure you have the the noun ending chart in front of you along with your adjective endings. And the more you practice and do practice problems and translate, the easier this will be. But if you need the charts, feel free to have them in front of you, right? It'll help you as you go through your translation. So once you feel pretty good with the grammar, and again, feel free to go back, pause, look at my grammar video, whatever you need to do, look at the textbook to feel comfortable. Once you've got that under control, now you'll be ready to translate this story. So again, we're going to break it into pieces and color code it and highlight the cases so that you have a better shot of seeing these cases in action and understanding how the story goes. So the story starts like this. You have Rida and Fossa Hyrebat. And again, Rida is your subject, the carriage. Hyrebat, imperfect tense, it was stuck in fossa, in the ditch, right? So the carriage is still stuck in the ditch. It has been for a bunch of chapters, and it continues to be in that ditch. Then you have Cornelii per viam ibant ad cauponam, quae non procul aberat. So you have the Corneliuses, Cornelii, and again, it's nominative plural, so you're talking about the entire family, not Cornelius, the dad, right, but his whole family. The Corneliuses ibant, they were going, per viam, along the road, ad cauponam, to the inn. Remember in the last chapter, they see an inn and they decide to go there to spend the night. So they were going along the road to the inn. And the inn, it has a little descriptive clause after it. So in other words, you're saying the cauponam, which, quae, meaning the caupona, the inn, non procul aberat, was not far away. Again, procul means kind of far off or in the distance. Non procul aberat, it's imperfect tense. It was not far away. Cornelia, quae non iam lacrimabat, cum Eucleidae ambulabat. So Cornelia, who no longer, non iam, lacrimabat, was crying. It's imperfect tense. So who no longer was crying. Ambulabat, was walking. Cum Eucleidae, with Eucleides. It's ablative because cum always takes an ablative noun. So with Eucleides. Pueros, quod praecurebant, identitam revocabat Cornelius. So to find the subject, you got to go to the very end. Pueros is accusative. It's our direct object. So the boys are not doing anything necessarily. It's Cornelius is the subject, right? Cornelius is doing something to the boys. So you start with your subject. Cornelius, identitam, again and again, revocabat, was calling back the pueros, the boys, right? So he keeps recalling them or telling them to come back. And it's the boys because praecurebant, they were running ahead. Right, they were running past him. So the boys keep running up the road. Cornelius, again and again, was calling them back. Aurelia, quamquam in caupona pernoctare ad hoc nolebat, lente cum Cornelio ibat. So Aurelia, although, right, nolebat, so ad hoc nolebat, she still, ad hoc nolebat, was not wanting or did not want, it's imperfect tense. Pernoctare, here's our complementary infinitive, to spend the night in caupona, in an inn. So remember, in the last chapter, Aurelia is really against going to the inn. So although she still doesn't want to spend the night in the inn, lente cum Cornelio ibat, she was going, ibat, lente, slowly, cum Cornelia, with Cornelius. So even though she didn't want to go, she's still walking with him. Mox ad cauponam apropinquabant. So soon, mox, right? Apropinquabant, they were approaching, meaning the family was approaching, ad cauponam, the inn. They were approaching to the inn, right? So they're getting to the inn is the idea. Neminem videbant, they were seeing, neminem, nobody. There's your direct object. They were seeing nobody. Voces tamen, hominum audiebant, they were hearing, audiebant, however, tamen, the voces, the voices, and then we have a genitive, hominum, of men or of people. So they were hearing people's voices. So they're getting at the idea that even though they're not seeing anyone, they can hear that there are people in the inn. Subito, duo canes, e janua cauponae se praecipitant et ferociter latrantes Cornelius petum. So suddenly, subito, we have a change in the action. So suddenly, and you'll notice, by the way, that whenever you have suddenly, it's flipping to the present moment. So you're going to see the verbs go from imperfect, like audiebant at the end of the first paragraph here, to present tense. So suddenly, right? Se praecipitant. It's duo cane. So two dogs is our subject. Two dogs, se praecipitant. They hurled themselves, or they rushed. E janua kalponai. Out of the door. E janua. Remember, it's ablative because it's motion out of. Kalponai is genitive. So you're saying out of the door of the inn. So dogs come running out. And ferociter, fiercely, right? Petunt, they look for Cornelius, the family, the Corneliuses. And it's latrantes, they're barking. So barking fiercely, you could say. They look for the Corneliuses. Statim fugit sextus. So immediately, statim, sextus fugit. He runs away. Because remember, sextus is kind of cowardly, right? So he flees, he runs away. Stat immobilis Marcus. So Marcus, stat, he is standing. It's from sto stare, to stand. So he stands immobilis, motionless, right? So he's kind of frozen. Aurelia perterrita exclamat. So Aurelia is described as perterrita, terrified, right? Or frightened. So terrified Aurelia exclamat, shouts, right? So she shouts. Cornelius ipse nihil facit. So Cornelius himself, ipse just means himself here, it's an intensifier. So Cornelius himself, nihil facit, does nothing, right? So everyone's frozen. Sextus runs away, Marcus is frozen, Aurelia is shouting, even the dad, Cornelius, doesn't do anything. Everyone's kind of shocked. These dogs come running out. Cornelia tamen non fugit sed ad canes manum extended. So Cornelia, however, Cornelia tamen, she doesn't run away, non fugit, she doesn't flee, but said she extended, she holds out or extends her manum, her hand, ad canes, to the dogs. So she's not afraid of the dogs, she thinks they're friendly, she holds out her hand to them. Ecce marce inquit, hi canes latrant modo. So she says, this is Cornelia talking, inquit. She says, look, Marcus. And again, Marcus is vocative because she's calling him by name. Hi canes, these dogs are only, modo, barking, latrant. They only bark. They are only barking. Nullum est periculum. There is nullum periculum, no danger, right? There is no danger. Ecce sexte, look sextus, caudas movent. They are moving, meaning the dogs are moving. Caudas, their tails. They're wagging their tails is the idea. So Cornelia is the only one who notices that the dogs are just barking, but they're actually wagging their tails. So they're not going to attack them. They're just kind of excited to see him. So she pets the dog and she calms everyone down. Eo ipso tempore ad januam calponai apparuit homo obesus, qui canes revocavit. So at that very moment, eo ipso tempore, again, it's ablative because it's showing time, right? A moment of time. At that very moment, apparuit, someone appeared, right? Who appears? A homo obesus, a fat man, right? So this chubby guy appears at the door, ad januam calponai, of the inn, right? So someone appears at the door of the inn. He's described as a homo obesus, right? A fat man. And this man, qui, right? Who, revocavit, called back the dogs, canes. So again, revocavit, you're going to see is setting you up for next chapter. It's what we call perfect tense, meaning he recalled or called back. So kind of, for now, think of it as a vocab term, but keep in mind why this looks a little bit different with a V in the middle of it. That's what you're going to be covering the next few chapters. So this man says, inquit, salvete hospites. So he says, hello, salvete hospites, hello friends, or hello guests. In calpona meo pernoctare vultis. So he asks a question. He says, in my inn, in calpona mea, and it's ablative because you're showing position or location, right? Inside my inn. Vultis, you all want. But because it's a question, you say, do you want? You finish it with the complementary infinitive, pernoctare. Do you want to spend the night? So the question he asks is, do you want to spend the night in my inn? This is what he's asking them. And he says, hic multi cives praeclari pernoctaverunt. So here, hic, meaning in my inn, many citizens, multi cives, and they're described as praeclari, distinguished or famous. So many famous citizens spent the night. Again, it's perfect tense. They spent the night, pernoctaverunt. So save the spelling for next chapter. You'll see how this all works. And he continues by saying, olim hic pernoctavit etiam legatus principis. So once, olim, right, once. Here, hic, a legatus, an envoy, right, a messenger or an envoy principis of the emperor, right, so someone really famous, an envoy of the emperor, pernoctavit, spent the night. Etiam means even. So if you kind of put it back together, he's saying once, even an envoy of the emperor spent the night here. He's trying to brag about his inn. He's saying, look how great it is. This legatus principis once spent the night here. Then you have salve mia Polydore interpellavit Euclides. Quid agis? So Euclides interpellavit, he interrupted, right? And he says, salve, hello, mia Polydore, my Apollodorus. So remember, Euclides knows this guy. Remember, he mentioned this in the last chapter, that the kaupo, the innkeeper, is a friend of his. His name is Apollodorus, which is a distinctly Greek name. And remember, Euclides referred to him as a vir Graecus, a Greek man in the last chapter. So Euclides interrupted, and he says, hello, my Apollodorus. How's it going? Quid agis? What are you doing, right? How are you? Quid agis? Me Hercule, responded Kaupo, nisi ero meam amicum Euclidem agnosco. So the Kaupo, the innkeeper, responds, and he says, me Hercule, right? By Hercules, right? It's this phrase of like, wow, oh my goodness, is kind of the idea. Nisi ero, he says, unless, nisi ero, I am mistaken. Agnosco, I recognize meum amicum Euclidem, my friend Euclides. So he's saying, wow, unless I'm mistaken, I recognize, I see my friend Euclides. So he's shocked to see Euclides here, right? He's not expecting it. So this is the connection between the two of them. They're both friends. Non eras inquit Euclides, litus te video. So Euclides, inquit, he says, non eras, you are not wrong. So remember, eras, right? Errare means to make a mistake or to be wrong. Eras, the S ending, is telling you, he's saying you are not wrong, right? Says Euclides. Litus te video. I'm happy, litus, video te. You could almost translate this as happily I see you. What he's really saying is I'm happy to see you, is the idea. Litus here is describing Euclides. He's kind of describing himself as happy. Video, I see you. Okay. Then he says, quod rida domini mei in fossa haeret immobilis necesse est hic in caupona pernoctare. So he says, because rida, the carriage of my master, domini mei, it's genitive. So because the carriage of my master, haeret, is stuck in fossa, in a ditch, immobilis, motionless, right? Immobilis is describing the rida, right? The carriage is motionless. So he says, because the carriage of my master is stuck in the ditch, motionless, it's necessary, necesse est, to spend the night, pernoctare, hic, here, in the inn, in caupona, right? In your inn. So he's describing or explaining why they're here. He says, our carriage is stuck in the ditch. Doleo, inquit caupo, quod rida est in fossa, sed gaudeo, quod ad meam cauponam nunc venitis, intrate omnes. So doleo, I'm sad, says the innkeeper, inquit caupo, right? He says, I'm sad because, quote, rida est in fossa, your carriage, or the carriage, but he really means your carriage, is in the ditch, in fossa, right? He says, I'm sad that the carriage is in the ditch, but said, gaudeo, I'm happy or I'm glad because venitis, you are coming, right? And again, it's TIS, so it's you all. So he's saying, I'm glad that you all now are coming. Nunc means now. You're now coming ad meam caupona, to my inn. So he's saying, I'm really sorry that your carriage is in the ditch, but I'm happy because now you're here at my inn, right? And I get to see you. Intrate omnes. Intrate is the plural positive imperative. So the TE gives it away as being a plural imperative, and he's telling them to do something. Intrare means to enter, so intrate means enter, right? It's a command. He's saying all of you, omnes, right? Enter everyone. So he's commanding everyone to come in. So this is the story. They get to the inn, right? You have the episode with the dogs kind of scaring everyone. But at the end of the day, it's the connection between Euclides and Apollodorus, right? They're old friends. And this is why Euclides said they should stay there. He said, yeah, I know that guy. It's not dangerous. He's a good guy. He's Greek. We should stay there. Now the two friends run into each other. They explain what's going on, and he welcomes them into the inn. And you're going to see this is where the Corneliuses spend the night. So again, the key thing you want to think about in this chapter is noun-adjective agreement. Make sure you're feeling comfortable with it, but you can still probably figure this out. Even if you're a little shaky on noun-adjective agreement, you can still tell which words are going with which. Practice it, read it aloud, work on your translation. The more you practice, the more comfortable you're going to feel. If you have any questions, put them in the chat, but otherwise, good luck, and hopefully you're feeling pretty good about it.